Welcome back to our channel, Everything Jax Real Estate. I'm Justin, I'm with Thrill Keeper Home Team, and you're on our channel, Everything Jax Real Estate, where, as you guessed it, we talk everything Jax Real Estate. Well, for this video, we're actually going to be diving into the market update report for August of 2024 as it relates to Jacksonville Beaches and Jacksonville Southside area. These areas are very near to my heart because these are areas that I actually have also grown up in over the course of my life. And ultimately, I like to provide as much value as I can on those areas for you, the audience, whether if you're living here currently or looking to make a move here. So we're going to be diving into the actives, the pendings, and the solds, the days on market, the price points for those. And we're also going to be discussing interest rates a little bit towards the end of the video. So I'm going to come back. So definitely stay tuned because you want to hear what I have to say. Alright, so before we get started, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and ring the bell so you get notified when we post more videos like this in the future. Your subscriptions really help us grow our channel and help allow us to provide you even more great content for here in Jacksonville, so it's very much appreciated. But as we get started, the first thing we always like to highlight is with discussing the market is, what were the actives like for any given month, in this case, August. Well, what I can tell you is for August, we had an overall amount of 626 homes available for sale. And of those 626 homes, 523 were still left at the end of August. This means we had 103 homes actually under contract in August for this specific area. That gave us a pen to list ratio or pending ratio of 16.5%, which is, it's not as high as we've seen. I'll leave it at that. What it actually does tell us, though, is that for the Jacksonville Beaches and Jacksonville Southside area, the market is somewhat slow. Now, part of this is this time of year, when we get into August, September, October, here in Northeast Florida, we do sort of see the market slow down some because of the fact that we have schools coming back in session, and a lot of buyers and sellers put their home buying and selling needs on hold due to the school year starting back up. This normally actually tends to take us through about December. Now, when we get to December, we sometimes do see a little bit of an increase in activity, and then it stays down a little bit through January, February as well. However, in the past couple of years, we haven't seen those typical seasonality trends like we would normally have expected. Because like right now, our August of 2024 is actually showing a less pending ratio than January, February did, which is not typical. And so what it tells us that we are going into a little bit of a slowing market. Now you may ask yourself, why is the market slowing? Well, the two big factors are, number one, interest rates. They've come down some since really April, May of this year when they were at their kind of peak for the year, but they're not down to a point yet where it's really attracting enough buyers to come back into the market, mixed with, again, those typical seasonality trends because of school and whatnot. The other factor is going to be prices. So prices have been on the uptick over the last decade or so, really ever since the recession, and they finally hit a point in the last year or two where they really kind of maxed out a lot of buyers for where rates are at currently. So really what we have to see to sort of see more interest in the market is either one, prices will have to start coming down some, or two, interest rates will have to start coming down some. There is a possibility you see a little bit of both, but most likely it's going to be one or the other because as interest rates start to come down, you may actually see some additional sellers hit the market to become buyers, which then will create more competition for you as a buyer if you are watching this video. That being said, when we take a closer look, we notice that homes in the $800,000 to $1 million price range made up the largest range of homes that were under contract. This ties into what we have discussed in previous videos, which is the fact that even with higher rates, sometimes these higher price points, in this case up to that $1 million range, become less affected. It's something we always discuss, our team does here in Northeast Florida, is that when you're talking a 1% rate increase, that hits everybody in different ways, but you're going to see it hit more in the lower ranges of the 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to $500,000 price points than you will maybe the $1 million to $2 million, because a lot of times people in those ranges are going to be putting down a substantial amount of money, and therefore part of that also gets put down towards buying down the rate, and so that in that sense, they are a little bit less affected because they do sometimes have an additional amount of available cash to use to offset these higher rates, whereas the lower price points, so to speak, don't. And that also is highlighted with the fact that the range of homes that still had the large amount of homes for sale was the $400,000 to $600,000 price point. So at that $400,000 to $600,000, that's going to be your typical home in these areas. And in this case, there's 129 listings still available at the end of August. Again, that does highlight, again, the fact that that is still the most desired price point for the area. It's just not selling as quickly as the higher price points are, to where you're seeing more of those homes going under contract. We also have the median list price for the area was $749,000. And so therefore what that tells us, we are seeing an uptick in that median list price, which means we're seeing more higher end homes hit the market, whereas compared to less lower end homes, and from a price point standpoint. So when you have those higher end homes in the market, it is going to create that higher median list price, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the market is appreciating. It just means that we're seeing more homes at a higher price point in the market than the lower price point. Now, when we look at the number of listings for sale versus pending, we see here that there's a pretty good divide, pretty good gap between properties for sale compared to contracts pending, from say 200,000 to really 800,000. It's not until we get over 800,000 we start to see the properties for sale start to decrease to a point where they're starting to become a little bit closer to those contracts pending, which means that there's less inventory and that there's still good buyer demand at those price points. So what this means is that if you are looking to buy a home right now in the Beaches area or South area of Jacksonville, and you're in that $200,000 to $800,000 price range, there's a good chance that you're going to be in a price point where you're going to have a lot of options, and you're going to have that ability to negotiate concessions or price reductions, maybe even repairs with the seller, more so than you could have done a couple years ago. Now, that's also to say that ultimately this might be a great time, because when rates start to come down, we will probably see that trend of that divide start to decrease some. And what we'll probably see is demand increase, which means contracts pending will increase, which means that those two lines will start to come back together some. It may not necessarily be at some point that we see contracts pending necessarily increase. It just may mean that properties for sale will decrease, because over time there'll be less of them if more buyers hit the market or enter the market. So something to keep in mind. Now, if you're a seller, just do keep in mind you are going to have competition, so it's going to be very important that when you're determining pricing for your home, you determine the three main things. Am I in a very highly desirable location? Does my condition warrant the price I'm asking for? And ultimately with that price, that third one, how do those two play into each other to determine that price? If you're in a very highly desirable location and your condition is, again, highly desirable, we're talking very minimal maintenance items, a lot of the majors at the home, roof, AC, water heater, plumbing, electric, the windows have been recently redone. By recently, we'll call it 10 years or less. And maybe, again, you've done some nice upgrades for the kitchen and bathroom. If you've done that and you're in a highly desirable location, you're probably seeing that you're less affected with today's current market trends in the area than maybe somebody else who is even priced 10, 20, 30,000 below you, but may need to still have a couple upgrades or updates done to the home that might be slowing down the buyer demand for their home. So just something to keep in mind. Ultimately, homes are still selling though, and that's the biggest thing I want to highlight with all this. Ultimately, when we do see changes in the market like this, the first thing that a lot of times you want to just wonder is, oh my goodness, is it a good time to buy? Is it a good time to sell? It must be a bad time, right? There's not really any bad time. It's more of just tempering your expectations of what it's going to look like. And a lot of that is just, again, being cognizant, being aware of what the market is currently doing. Because at the end of the day, people are always going to buy homes and people are always going to sell homes. That's never going to change. The only thing that changes is, are there more people buying or are there more people selling? That's really the big piece that really kind of changes things. Now, the next thing we're going to look at is how many homes sold in the last 6 months. And what we can see here is we had a total of 938 homes that sold in the last 6 months with a median sold price of $589,000. Now, this definitely does highlight what I was mentioning before, which is that we are having more homes hit the market at higher price points in this area and maybe lower price points, which is why there's such a big discrepancy between the median list price and the median sold price, even when we go back 6 months. And ultimately what that tells us is that does tell us that those higher priced homes are ultimately not just hitting the market more often, but also more desirable to buyers right this second who are buying, because of the fact that those are price points that you are seeing really good demand. And when we break it down, we do notice $400,000 to $600,000 price homes, that range do contain the highest number of sold listings, which is not uncommon because again, that's going to be your most typical, most desirable kind of price point for the area, all things considered. Now, alternatively, we saw there's a total of 135 listings that failed to sell in that same period. This is going to continue similar trends from our previous videos. If you haven't seen those, it's definitely worth a watch. They're all on our channel, Everything Jax Real Estate. But 135 listings that failed to sell, that's not anything to be concerned about because at the end of the day, homes can fail to sell for multiple different reasons. It can be because seller just chose they didn't want to sell it anymore. Maybe they had a job relocation that didn't occur. Maybe the condition didn't warrant the price, and so they decided to take it off the market for that reason. Maybe it just wasn't listed properly by the realtor that they used. Believe it or not, that does happen sometimes because who you work with does in fact matter. But ultimately, when we have 135 listings that fail to sell, it's not uncommon, and it is in any market. We're always going to see homes that fail to sell because there's always different reasons that go into account. What we want to look at with that is that number increasing at an exponential rate, month over month with these market updates? Because then that's telling us something is severely going on with the market that is proven to be more of a negative than what we really realize. So in this case, again, we're just seeing some changes in the market, mainly due to rates and prices and seasonality still. Now, on this next page, what we're looking at here is we're looking at days on market. And what we can see is for the homes that are still active and available, the days on market is sitting right around a median time frame of 53 days. So with homes sitting on the market for roughly just under 2 months, what that needs to tell you is that if you are buying, it means that if you see a house tomorrow, you may not necessarily have to wait, or you may not necessarily have to move very quickly on it. What it means is you may have that ability, that luxury to give yourself some time to look at some other options, to talk to a lender before putting an offer in, to see what the numbers look like. Because at the end of the day, most homes are sitting for a little bit, not all. Do keep that in mind. I want to be very open about that. Not all homes are going to fall within this. This is a median, so it's kind of that middle range. There are going to still be homes that sell within a day, within 5 days, 10 days, 15 days. There'll also be ones that may be on the market 150 days. So ultimately, just do keep that in mind. And what that does tell us though is that ultimately with most homes, you will have some ability to take your time with it to make sure you're vetting any and all questions you have, ideally with your realtor or with other entities that will have those answers for you. So that way you make the most knowledgeable decision when you do make your decision on a home. Now, if you're selling, it does mean that you're going to have to take into account that your home's going to be in the market a little bit longer than you may think. Now, if you're thinking it's going to take 60, 90 days to go under contract, then you're in a great range. But if you're thinking that you're going to put your home on the market and it'll be sold tomorrow, again, there is always that possibility, but you got to be in the top 5% of homes on the market at that time. So it's going to be a big piece of it. And a lot of that comes down to just, again, having the right people in your court to be able to give you the best knowledge possible to know if you are in that 5% or if you're not. It's okay if you're not. It just means that you just want to make sure you give yourself mentally enough time to get your home sold for top dollar. And again, when we then transition that from homes that are still available to homes that actually sold, we look at homes that sold in the last 6 months. We actually saw the days on market was 14 days. So again, that's just to highlight that if your home is priced well and the condition warrants that price and the location's ideal like these are going to be, you're not going to have to wait nearly as long, and you will probably be under contract and closed relatively quickly. And again, as we discussed earlier, that median sold price was $589,000 when we look at a 6-month look back. Now, when we compare that to our last 30 days, what we find that the prices of homes that are actually selling now for a median price of $565,000 with a median days on market of 16 days. So what we are seeing is in at least the last month, which is August, the days on market are slightly above that median for the 6 months, and our price point is a good bit, $24,000 below what the 6-month average told us, or 6-month median told us. And then ultimately what that tells us is the market is slowing down. Sellers are more willing to make concessions to get their home sold for as quickly as they can. And so therefore, if you're looking to buy, it is a great time because of the fact that yes, you're dealing with maybe slightly higher rates than you may have wanted, but you also are potentially having more and more ability to negotiate than you ever did before, because we are truly becoming and getting closer to an equilibrium market compared to where we were at a couple years ago, where it's a hyper seller's market. So it does make a huge difference. We're also going to look at the median list to sales ratio, which was 99% for this area. Now you may ask yourself, okay, so if prices are coming down, why is the list to sales ratio 99%? Shouldn't there be a bigger discrepancy there? And again, keep in mind, list to sales ratio is pretty much just telling us, based off how much it was listed for versus how much it sold for, that how much did it sell in relation to that list price. So if you had a house for 100, what this is telling us is that you got $99,000 for that house. Well, do keep in mind that a lot of sellers, they are coming down with their prices a good bit ahead of time. So therefore, a lot of the negotiating for the price reductions that are kind of happening before the buyer's even involved. Where a lot of buyers are doing their negotiations are actually a lot of times in the concessions. So with the way rates are right now, you do have a lot of buyers asking sellers for concessions, which is not going to show up in this list of sales ratio. Now, concessions can be for closing costs and prepaids, but they can also be for rate buy downs. Yeah, you heard that right. You can use a concession. If you want to ask the seller to provide you $5,000 to buy down the rate, you can do it. Seller has to agree to it, but it can be done. And so we are seeing that still a good bit in this market right now to force buyers to get a rate that they're more comfortable with, even if it's just a short-term rate, just be able to get to the point where they can then refinance once rates come down to get the rate that they really do want. But at least then, there's no rush to get it done, and they already have their house locked down and ready to go. So overall, that's something I always like to point out. Now, last thing we're going to look at on this page is the absorption rate for the last 6 months. Now, what I do believe we're going to start seeing is that absorption rate may start to come up some in future videos. And what that rate is, in this case, it's 3.3 months of inventory. What that rate tells us, that if no new homes in the market, we get out of homes to sell in 3.3 months. So a little over 100 days for this area. And ultimately, it does still say it's a seller's market, but part of that is because we are using data from April, May, and June. Even March and February, I think actually help the numbers. They don't hurt the numbers. And so I think, like I said, what we'll see is we may see that come up some in the next couple months until we start to see rates come down at a normal pace, so to speak, allowing more buyers to enter the market. So again, that's something that's really great if you're a buyer to see. If you're a seller, it's probably not necessarily what you want to see, but do keep in mind there's always ways to work around it. Take into account condition and location of your home. And then lastly, as we get through this video, I just want to, again, kind of highlight what the absorption rate is in different price points. Because in the day, it's great to say, hey, it's 3.3 months of inventory in the area, but what does it mean for me if I'm looking at a $400,000 house, or if I'm looking at a $650,000 house, or a $250,000 condo? Well, what I can tell you is if you are looking under 600,000, as you may be able to see on this graph, you are under 3 months of inventory, which does mean that you are still in a seller's market. Now, even though it does say that, do keep in mind, just because you're in a seller's market doesn't mean that a buyer is going to necessarily, provide you what it is you're asking on your price. But it does mean that you're going to have enough eyes on your home that if it's priced well, you should not have to wait extremely long to get your home sold. Now, if you're in those higher price points of say 8 to 9, 9 to a million, couple million, really up to 1.4, you're still somewhat in a seller's market. You're also teetering on that equilibrium market. And so again, it's just to kind of say that ultimately you may get your price, but you're going to have to wait a little while in a lot of cases because there's just not enough buyers out there to give you the price you want. And then as we go into the higher price points, As you can see here, really 1.6 to even 2 million, we're actually in more of a buyer's market. So that does bring a good point. If you're watching this video and you want to, buy a home and you're looking somewhere in the Beaches in the Southside area, it's a buyer's market. You have some leeway. You may not necessarily have a seller who wants to work with you on that, but not necessarily 9 times out of 10, but in most cases in today's world, you probably will be able to find a seller who will work with you on a house that you're going to like, because of the fact that you are in very much demand by sellers, because there aren't enough of you. So it's something just to kind of point out, something to kind of look into, because ultimately, if you're watching this video and you have questions, I'm always available for a call. I'm only a phone call away, or you can schedule time on my calendar. And ultimately, if you want to do those things, in the description of this video is a link to my calendar. It's also my phone number. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions, comments, concerns about the area, because I'm always happy to help answer them. And as far as, again, my thoughts as we go through the rest of this year with these future market updates, I do believe we're going to see inventory come up some. I think we're going to see some prices come down a little bit due to that increased inventory. But I do also think that once rates start to come down, and it could happen as soon as I'm taping this in the beginning of September, it could happen as soon as within the next week or two, I do think we'll start to see some buyers re-enter the market. And with that, we may not see prices come down as far as maybe you, the viewer, are expecting. But ultimately, again, no one has a crystal ball. We never know exactly where things are going to go. All we can do is predict based off of the data. And so that's always the joy and the curse of the process. But that being said, it's still a great time to buy or sell. So without further ado, I'm Justin with the Real Keeper Home Team. You're on Show Everything Jacksonville Real Estate. As I mentioned, in the description is linked to my calendar and my phone number. Don't hesitate to reach out. I'm always here to help. And I will catch you guys on the next market update video.